Hey guys, and for those of you that don't know me, my name's Trent. I am a professional drone pilot in the film industry, been working there for the last 11 years, since well before the drones that we know today. I started back in the day when we were flying radio control helicopters with a camera bolted to the front. Now obviously over the past decade or so, the drone industry has absolutely exploded. And to me, since I primarily fly large heavy lift industrial platforms, these small, compact, single operator drones have always been more of a toy. But this is the Mavic 3 Cine. It's what I would have considered a toy drone, but this thing costs $5,000. Okay, so obviously the Mavic 3, and actually none of the Mavic line would really be a toy. But for a long time, at least to me, they've lived in the realm of the market that is the more entry-level, kind of beginner drones that are used for a lot of the kind of lower end work in the industry, being like wedding videos, real estate work, or creating content for something like YouTube. But having something with the price like this, it makes me wonder, where does it fit in the industry? Basically, when is the Mavic 3, and especially the Cine version, worth its price? So if you're someone that was considering the Mavic 3 or looking at buying either your first drone or upgrading one that you already have, but you're kind of wondering, should I spend the money? Is it worth the extra? Well, that's what this video is about. Now, I'm not meaning for this to be an actual detailed review video. There are plenty of those online. But before I get into where I think this thing fits in the industry and where I think the price might be justified, I do want to give you guys my quick thoughts on it. And honestly, my overall opinion is that this thing's good. It's really good. Now right away from the first flight on this thing, when I pulled in the footage and dropped in just a basic input LUT to bring the log footage back to a Rec. 709, I was immediately impressed. The image off of it is really good. It's got a lot of latitude, and the color representation, at least through the Hasselblad chip, is really nice. It reminded me of the Mavic 2 Pro, which I loved the color profile on, but I didn't love the data rate or the bit rate behind it wasn't as high as something like the Air 2S, which is what I've been using for the past year or so for YouTube content. Now, one thing I was really excited for on this thing was the telephoto camera, the second camera on the gimbal, which is I believe a 7x zoom compared to the field of view of the main camera. But I'm gonna be honest, at least in its current state, that telephoto camera to me is pretty much useless. You can only shoot in 4K 30, and it's in a really compressed format. You cannot utilize the ProRes codec. You have no ability to shoot and log, and the image overall just looks soft. So it might be something that could be of use to someone that's, say, in the surveying or inspection industry, or even like first responders. But if you're thinking about this drone and hoping you'll get some awesome long lens shots off of that second camera, unfortunately, that has not been my experience. The main camera, though, is very nice. The 4/3 inch Hasselblad chip is really pretty, and the encoding on the back end does a really good job of writing it to file. Now, again, I'm not doing any sort of technical review here, but I have compared this footage to that of both the DJI Air 2S, which would be the next step down price-wise and quality-wise. And obviously the image that comes directly off the cameras are slightly different, but after a little tweaking to get as close of a comparison as I can get, what I can say is that the Hasselblad chip does truly have a better color science. It's just something about it. It's more of a feel than something I can truly describe, but especially when you bring into account the amount of latitude that this camera has as far as highlights to shadows, the Mavic 3 is a pretty healthy step up from the Air 2S. Now I also took some comparison shots from both the Mavic 3 Cine as well as the Inspire 2 with the X7 camera on it, which is currently DJI's highest end professional cinema drone. Now the X7 on the Inspire has a Super 35mm sensor, which is a fair bit bigger than the Micro Four Thirds on the Mavic 3. And that camera is able to shoot 6K RAW. So obviously when you're just looking at specs, the Inspire has a larger sensor with a higher resolution and interchangeable lenses, so it should have a much nicer image. But honestly, I don't know that I feel like that's the case. The Inspire does have a nicer lens flare, but at the same time, there's a couple of the colors in that flare that kind of feel cheap to me. And at some points that flare is overwhelming. The Mavic 3 though has a much more reserved flare, which I think is actually a little bit more tasteful most of the time. Latitude-wise though, they're actually closer than I thought they would be, and while the Inspire does, I think, have a little bit better in its highlight roll-offs than what the Mavic does, I still kind of like the image of the Mavic almost a little bit more. And now what really surprised me was I went out and shot both at night, and now neither of these drones are gonna be what I would consider like a vampire camera, like something like the A7S III, which has like crazy high ISO and you can shoot in basically pitch black. Both of these are fairly restricted when it comes to low light. Now I don't know if it's just because my X7 camera is fairly old at this point and it's been used a lot, but I was getting a lot more noise through the X7 than I got through the Mavic. And honestly, the sensitivity of the Mavic seemed to be quite a bit higher than that of the X7. So again, I don't know, maybe my X7's blown out, but this thing, to me, shot better low light than the Inspire with the X7 on it. Now with all of that in mind, the tests that I've done, it's time for me to figure out who this thing is for. Now basically to me, it's for anyone that is actively using their drone as part of something that they're making money from. So if you're flying your drone and shooting video for hire, then I think the Mavic 3 is a worthwhile upgrade from the DJI Air 2S. However, if you're someone that's just starting or you're not quite to the point where you're able to charge for the work that you're doing and you're still working on building up a reel or a resume, the Air 2S is a great drone. The image off of it is actually higher resolution, being that it's 5.4K versus the 5.1K out of this. It's still a 10-bit file with a pretty good bitrate behind it, and at $1,300 it's pretty hard to beat. Now let's get onto the Cine version, which costs $2,000 more than the standard Mavic 3 Fly More combo. With that, you get the DJI RC Pro, as well as a built-in 1TB SSD and the ProRes recording codec. Now the Cine combo is the one that's a little bit harder to justify. Because I'm gonna be honest, when I've compared the H.265, which is a higher compression codec, to the ProRes 422HQ, it's been very hard for me to distinguish any real difference. If I zoom in really far and I look specifically at the detail in the shadows, I do see an improvement with the ProRes 422. That said, will your viewers ever notice the difference? Probably not. So here are my thoughts on the Cine combo. The RC Pro is awesome. This thing is a huge improvement over having to pull your phone out and plug it in every single time. So this is definitely worth something. Whether it's worth $1,200, that's gonna be up to you. As far as the ProRes goes and the internal solid state drive, I don't think that they are a necessity for most people. If you are handling the post-production on what you're shooting on your drone, then I think you're gonna be just fine with the standard Mavic 3. However, if you are working for a production solely as the drone pilot and handing off footage, the ProRes files to me are a much more robust and professional product to be handing over to your client. Hopefully you're getting a little rental on your gear, then you can probably justify going for the Cine version. Now, one downside to the built-in 1TB SSD is that you would have to hand off the entire drone to the media manager from your shooter, the DIT, meaning that you can't just hand off a memory card and continue shooting. On top of that, you have to have the battery in the drone and the drone powered on for it to register with the computer, meaning that if you were for some reason to crash one into a lake and recover the drone, if it won't power on, you can't get the footage off of it. So that's kind of a weird caveat that I can't say I'm super thrilled about. Oh, and one other time that the Cine version might be worth it, even if you are handling the post-production yourself on your projects, is if you're going to upload any footage for stock content. To me, the higher quality that the stock content is that you're uploading right now just makes it more future-proof. Meaning that if you do take the time to upload those clips to a stock website, that they're not gonna become obsolete as fast as other codecs out there, so then hopefully allowing you to make a little bit more passive income for future years. See, that's one more time I would probably go for the Cine version. So anyway, guys, that ended up being a lot longer worded than I expected, but that's my overall rundown on this thing. It is a nice drone. One thing I forgot to mention is that it's got a little gimbal lock on it, a digitally or electronic lock that locks the gimbal when it's powered off, which is pretty cool. And there are a bunch of other little features in this thing that are cool, and I do think that the price, while it was a bit of a sticker shock, I do think it's justified given the amount of technology and how nice the image is coming off this. But one thing I wanna remind you guys is that the gear at the end of the day is not that important. All too often I see people stretch beyond their means to buy a piece of gear that they think's gonna make them better at what they do. When at the end of the day, they just needed to work on building their skill sets, which is easy to do thanks to the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creative and curious people. They've got thousands of online courses for everything from photo and video to graphics, illustration, and more. Each class includes a video lesson as well as a class project. And most courses are less than an hour, and they're broken up into small pieces so you can fit them into any schedule. And Skillshare does have courses specifically on drones, and two in particular that I like to recommend are from my friends over at Wild Rabbit Production. They've got courses that are both entry level as well as advanced to help you build your skills so you can go out and shoot better with your drone. Now, Skillshare was nice enough to offer a free 1-month premium membership to the first 1,000 of you guys to click the link below. Thank you again, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video, and thank you guys for watching. I hope I answered some of your questions if you were in the market for one of these, and I hope this wasn't too far off the beaten path since I do drone flying as well as real flying. So, like always, guys, you know the drill. Like this video if you do, subscribe if you haven't, come be my wingman. See you on the next one. Peace.